Hey there, I'm going to add a wireless relay to my Shop Vac. After seeing a premium brand with this feature, I thought, hey, I can do that. So I did.
I'll use a 12-volt AC adapter to power a 433 MHz wireless relay. All that is going to get crammed in there.
I need to start by opening up this 12 volt 1 amp power supply to get the board out. 1 amp should be more than enough to power the relay. Oftentimes, these things are glued shut, so I like to use my bench vise to crack that seal. This one, however, has a single Torx, which takes a frustratingly long time to get out. Once it's out, though, I need to get the board out of the casing without breaking it. I will often keep screws that I've pulled out of something for future use or future fixes. However, the Torx goes right in the garbage. With the case open and the board out, I'm going to strip the ends with my automatic wire stripper and then tin the wire so that it doesn't fray when I put it into the terminal block. Stray wires can short, breaking the circuit boards, which I just harvested, or potentially harming the relay, and I don't really want that. I'm going to do a bench test with all the components first to make sure that it works how I think it's going to work before I go through the trouble of putting it in the Shop Vac. So for this, I'm going to use a light socket because it's a pretty easy way to tell if something's working or not working. I have to wire it up since it's not wired up already. The black wire is called the line, the white wire is the neutral.
I've got 110 volts into the AC adapter, which outputs 12 volts DC to power the relay. The relay can be wired up two ways, normally open and normally closed. Normally open means that it would be by default off. Normally closed means it would be on. I want it to be normally open or off by default, and by pressing the button, we'll close the circuit and turn on the vacuum. I want to keep the original switch, so that way I don't have to have a remote handy to turn it on or off.
So I'll have this go into my relay and then out of my relay to the black line on this light bulb, which I've borrowed from another part of my basement. This is my soldering station, which I made a while ago, and I'm quite happy with it. I'll do another video explaining in depth what it is and what it does. So now I'm going to make this as safe as I can. I don't want to touch this, that, or any of that when it's plugged in, because that can be uncomfortable. I might scream like a girl, and nobody wants that. Well, you might, but I don't. So I've got it plugged in. I didn't get zapped, which is good, I guess. Oh, that's not good. Well, I had one of the wires just fall off the bottom of my switch here, which is not so good. So I'm just going to fix that, and we'll be back in business. There, no, I don't become part of the circuit. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Look, it works. Now, these little relays have different modes. You can get 2-button remotes, so you have on and then off. You can have it so that it's only on when you are holding the button. And another one that I didn't bother reading about because I want the on-off style. I thought one button would be a lot easier. But the prototype seems to work how I envisioned it working, so now I can go ahead and take this all apart and cram it inside the Shop Vac. Whee! So now I need to take apart the Shop Vac so that I can fit the 12-volt power supply and the relay. Fortunately, it's only 4 screws, so it's pretty easy. And I've got a magnet out of a hard drive to help me collect the screws out of the nooks and crannies in here. The hard drive magnets are quite strong, so it works well for this. It should have plenty of space up here. It came with this nice little box that I think I'll use. I've got the wires routed, but there's this little ear that needs to get clipped off there. Look at how nice that looks. So this will
get connected to the switches wires, one on either side, because this acts kind of like a secondary switch. So I'll still have the factory switch so I can turn it on and off without a remote, but then I can put a remote on the end of the hose or on my drill press or on my sander or whatever.
If you're new to doing stuff like this, it's always a good idea to either write a map down or take pictures before you start cutting wires, because sometimes they start to look the same, or if they just use black wires inside, it's hard to remember what goes where. I've done this quite a bit, so I'm confident that I won't mess it up. I like to twist the ends of the wire together before I add solder. It just makes it a more stable connection. I'm using solder and heat shrink because it's a strong, low-profile connection. I could use wire nuts or morettes, or those gray with orange lever terminal strips, but those are bulky and they're more expensive than just solder and heat shrink. I'm using a lighter to shrink the heat shrink. I could use a heat gun, but that's across the shop and I'm lazy and the lighter's right here, so that was a little bit easier. The downside to soldering is if you make a mistake or forget to add a wire like I did, you have to cut the heat shrink off and desolder it, which can be a pain. But overall, it's a nice sturdy connection, and it's a more permanent connection than some of the others. Morettes are a good quick connection and can be used to join stranded and solid wire together, and if they're installed correctly, they can be in service for decades. But solder is pretty quick too, and it's quite strong. Soldering can seem fairly daunting if you haven't done it before. My advice is just find some wires and practice, practice, practice. If you can solder headphone wire, you're doing pretty good. That stuff's really thin and a royal pain to solder. Once you get the hang of it though, it's a really handy skill to have, and it'll open up lots of doors to you.
Don't really want to use hot glue because I don't want it to get hot in and around the motor and then let go or drip and goop something else up. So I think I will do zip ties. That ought to do it.
I just need to drill a couple mounting holes so that I can slip some zip ties through these ribs here. And then I can zip tie the 12-volt AC adapter power board onto it, and that'll keep it nice and secure for years to come. I don't want to rely solely on glue because glue can fail, and I guess so can zip ties, but I have more confidence in zip ties than I do silicone or hot glue or crazy glue. For this application anyways, they are fine glues for other uses.
That'll do. I do think that I'll put some silicone in here so that these wires aren't just vibrating around. That ought to do it. Now, there is a problem. There's this learning button. That needs to be accessible from the outside. So, thinking I will either make a tunnel that I can access with a probe, or I could glue a block to that. I think the tunnel is going to be a little bit safer. I'm going to use the tail end of this previously loved pen. The ink stops about there, so I'm going to nip that off. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to drill a hole in here that roughly lines up with that, and then also a hole in this top shell, and then I'll trim it flush after everything is stuck down. That seems like the best idea.
What I've got here are digital calipers. They're good for making precise measurements of things, but also the tips are sharp, so they're nice for scribing on soft things like plastic or even aluminum. Now, most people probably won't use their expensive calipers for this because they are a precision instrument. However, mine are not expensive, so I don't really care if I throw off the calibration or ruin them. Also, when you're using any power tool, remember it is not your friend. It is seeking your life juice, and it will do so with reckless abandon.
Oh yeah. I'm going to use silicone because it's a bit more forgiving and it sticks to a lot of stuff. I would love to use crazy glue, but I don't want it to drip down into the button, making it not work, since that button is actually pretty important. I need to be able to program the other two remotes that I have. And if that button is super glued stuck, then it's not going to work. It'd be really cool if I could mount that little probulation hole close to the switch, because then it'd be accessible from the outside. Yeah, let's do that. Main switch works.
Well, it all works, so I'm going to button this back up. That hard drive magnet is a handy place to keep the screws so they don't run away or get scattered across the shop, especially if your shop is kind of messy.
There it is. Let's super glue that first.
Now, I know I said I wouldn't super glue it, but I'm quite confident at this point it won't run down and clog the switch. Yeah, we'll just let that dry out.
There it is. So for each remote, click, click, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, yay, it works. Still. Woo. All right. Well, if you made it this far in the video, I thank you. I suppose I'm done for the day or night or whenever you're watching this video. Yeah, the camera work could use some work. I blame the cameraman, which is these two binder clips on some paracord. Yeah, share it with your friends. I'd appreciate it. Thanks. God bless.